Welcome back, everyone, to the channel. You know we love to dig deep around here. Today, we're diving into the world of Formula One. We're going to explore the crazy rise of McLaren and what it takes to become a champion in this sport.
Oh, yeah, for sure. This is a good one.
So to break this down, we've got a really interesting conversation between two Spanish F1 personalities, and we're using that as our main source.
And we'll try to extract some of that F1 gold from these experts.
Exactly. So you ready to get into it?
Absolutely. Let's go.
All right. So these experts are talking about how McLaren went from practically the bottom of the barrel,
Yeah, second to last in 2018.
second to last in 2018, all the way to snatching that championship title in 2025.
I mean, that's incredible.
It's wild, right? And what's even more fascinating is this isn't just a story about splashing cash on the best drivers or, having some super secret cutting-edge tech.
Right. Even these experts are kind of baffled by just how McLaren managed to pull this off.
Like they had some secret sauce or something.
Exactly. Which makes this deep dive even more interesting, right?
Totally. So 6 seasons for a total 180. It's pretty mind-blowing. Where do we even begin to unpack this?
Well, the first thing that really jumped out from this conversation was stability. They talk a lot about stability.
Okay, stability.
Makes sense. F1, it's such a high-pressure environment. Things are always changing super fast.
Right.
So having that solid foundation can be a game changer.
So stability is key. But what does that actually look like in action?
Yeah.
How did McLaren create that stable environment?
Well, they pointed to McLaren's leadership and the way they've kept their technical direction consistent. This was super important during that whole climb to the top.
Okay, so consistent leadership, consistent technical direction.
Got it. Yeah, and they specifically mentioned that McLaren kept the same technical director for all 6 seasons, while other teams, they were cycling through 3 or 4 different people in that same role.
Right. Makes sense. That continuity lets you build on what you've learned and refine your strategy. You're not starting from scratch every year.
Exactly. It's like building a house. You need that strong foundation to keep building upwards.
That's a good analogy. So it's about consistency, allowing the team to grow and learn from all those experiences.
Exactly. And this brings us to Zach Brown, the CEO of McLaren.
Oh, yeah.
These experts, they paint a picture of him as a real racer at heart, someone who just lives and breathes motorsport. And get this, he's not bogged down by all that corporate bureaucracy.
Interesting. So he has a lot of freedom to make decisions.
Exactly. He can make bold moves, protect his team from outside pressures, and really focus on the long-term vision.
Yeah, that's important, to have a leader who's truly invested in the team and its success, like a captain steering the ship.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that's where things get interesting when we compare him to Aston Martin and their approach with Lawrence Stroll.
Okay, how so?
Well, Aston Martin, they've poured a ton of money into a new factory, all these fancy resources.
Right, they've been making big moves.
But Stroll, he's more of that traditional CEO figure. He's focused on the big picture,
Yeah.
Whereas Brown, he's down in the trenches making those crucial racing decisions on a much more granular level.
So they have very different leadership styles.
Yeah, and these experts seem to think that this difference could be a major factor in whether or not Aston Martin can achieve what McLaren did.
So it's not just about having money and resources. You need someone who understands the sport inside and out and is actively involved in the racing side of things.
Exactly. And they give a specific example. They say someone like Zach Brown, who doesn't have to answer to some higher-up infigurance. He has the power to make tough calls. Like if someone messed up, he can let them go based purely on what's best for the team's performance.
Doesn't have to worry about all those political pressures or corporate hoops to jump through. So interesting.
Right. So it's about having the freedom to put the team's performance first. And this long-term vision that ties into the next thing, they brought up the power of momentum in F1.
Momentum. You mean how winning creates this positive feedback loop? Like once you have that winning car, it gives you a head start for the next season.
Exactly. It's like a snowball effect. And it's not just the technical advantage either. It's the mental impact it has on the whole team. A winning streak builds confidence, attracts top talent, and everyone starts believing they can achieve anything.
It's this force that keeps pushing the team forward.
Exactly.
So to sum up, stability lays the groundwork, strong leadership sets the direction, and the momentum gives you that extra fuel to keep winning. But what about the car itself? McLaren had to make smart decisions about tech and development, right?
Oh, absolutely. But they didn't necessarily have the biggest budget.
Yeah.
These experts suggest they were really strategic about where they put their resources. Like, they prioritized aerodynamics over those super expensive engine upgrades.
Interesting.
And this gamble really paid off with the 2022 regulations, which put a bigger emphasis on aerodynamics.
So they weren't just throwing money around.
Yeah.
They knew where to allocate those resources for maximum impact.
Exactly. And that leads to a really interesting question. Can another team pull off what McLaren did with all these factors at play?
I bet that's where Aston Martin comes back into the picture.
You got it. They have the ambition, they have the resources, but their recent performance hasn't exactly been setting the world on fire.
True.
The real challenge in F1 is consistency, getting those results consistently. And that's something Aston Martin hasn't quite figured out yet.
So even with their shiny new factory, all that talent, and seemingly endless money, they're still struggling to find that winning formula.
Right. And that brings us to another crucial element that these experts highlighted: understanding how to navigate the ever-changing landscape of F1.
What do you mean by that?
Well, they talked about eras in F1, like how since 2010 we've basically seen two major forces dominating, Mercedes and Red Bull.
Yeah, makes sense.
But they believe McLaren's victory could mark the start of a new era.
So is McLaren now the team to beat? Could they become the next dominant force like Mercedes or Red Bull?
It's hard to say for sure, but what's interesting is that the current regulations are coming to an end. So it's unlikely we'll see one team dominate in the same way going forward. These experts, they seem to agree that consistency is still king, but with tech and strategies always changing, it's going to be super tough to maintain that level of dominance for a long time.
Yeah, and we've seen so much variation. Even this season, Red Bull had those moments of total domination. But then we also saw Verstappen struggling to even crack the top 5 on some tracks.
Exactly. There's a lot more parity now, meaning the teams are much closer in terms of performance, which makes everything unpredictable and more exciting to watch. I mean, we saw Hülkenberg qualifying in the top 3. That shows you how close things have become.
So does that mean anyone could be champion next year? Could we see a team like Williams pull off a miracle?
Well, it's not impossible, but it's highly unlikely. They make this great analogy to athletes. They said, imagine a world-class marathon runner trying to shave 30 seconds off their best time.
Right.
It takes an insane amount of effort to make even tiny improvements at that level.
Whereas someone just starting out, they have way more room for improvement.
Exactly. And that's the hurdle for teams like Williams. They have a lot of ground to cover, and catching up to those front runners is a long and tough journey.
So we can't predict the future of F1. But what we can learn from McLaren is that success comes from a mix of things: stability, strong leadership, and that momentum we talked about. But clearly there's more to this story.
Oh, yeah, for sure. And it's those often overlooked details, the little things about team dynamics and strategic decision-making that we'll be exploring in the next part of our deep dive.
It's funny, when you think about it, McLaren's journey, it's kind of like those crazy endurance races they have in motorsport.
Oh, yeah.
It's not all about speed, It's about endurance, strategy, knowing when to push and when to hold back.
Right, like pacing yourself.
Yeah, exactly. And that's where having someone steady at the helm like Zach Brown, that becomes super crucial. So true. It's a marathon, not a sprint. And speaking of strategy, making those smart decisions under pressure. The experts also talked about the importance of understanding how to use your resources wisely.
Yeah, they really dug into that. How McLaren figured out where to focus their energy, how to get the most out of their budget and time.
It's like they cracked the code for being efficient in a sport that's famous for just burning through cash.
Totally. It's like that saying, right? Work smarter, not harder. McLaren might not have had the deepest pockets, but they knew how to make every dollar count.
Absolutely. And that's a valuable lesson for any team, really, in any field. It's about setting priorities, focusing on what really matters, and avoiding distractions.
Couldn't agree more.
So we've talked about stability, strong leadership, strategic use of resources, all playing big roles in McLaren's success. But how do those things actually translate into action? What can other teams learn from this? Like, give me something concrete.
Well, they gave a specific example. McLaren's approach to engine development. They went with a more conservative strategy, focusing on reliability and consistency, instead of going all out for raw power.
Interesting. So not always about having the most powerful engine or the newest tech.
Right. And this allowed them to avoid those expensive engine failures, the grid penalties, which in the end turned out to be a really smart move.
It's about making strategic choices, prioritizing consistency, reliability, over chasing those tiny gains.
Exactly. And it all circles back to that momentum thing we talked about. By consistently scoring points, finishing races, McLaren was able to build that positive feedback loop, keep pushing themselves forward.
It's like they were playing the long game, building a solid foundation, instead of going for risky strategies.
Precisely. Now let's bring Aston Martin back into the mix. They definitely have the ambition, the resources, but can they really follow in McLaren's footsteps? What do the experts say about that?
Yeah, what's their take? Considering all the investments Aston Martin has made,
Mm-hmm.
and their goal of becoming a real championship contender.
Well, they stress that Aston Martin is starting from a different place, both literally and figuratively. They've got that brand new factory, which is awesome.
Yeah.
But new facilities, they can also come with new headaches, as we talked about before.
It's like moving into a bigger house. Exciting, but it takes time to settle in. There can be those unexpected hiccups along the way.
Exactly. And then you have the leadership dynamic. Lawrence Stroll, he's super successful, but he comes from a different world than Zach Brown.
Yeah, he's more of a business mogul.
While Brown is a racer through and through.
Exactly. And the experts, they seem to suggest that this difference in mindset can have a big impact on a team's culture, their performance.
Interesting.
They point to McLaren's structure. It's flat.
Yeah.
Communication is open. Decisions happen fast. This agility lets them adapt to whatever happens on the track, react to their rivals' moves.
So it's not just about having a leader who's passionate. It's about creating an environment where information flows easily. Decisions are made quickly. Precisely. They even compare it to those tech startups, where you have to be nimble and adaptable to survive in a market that's constantly changing.
It's like they're saying that in Formula One, just like in the tech world, being able to pivot quickly, adjust to new info. That can be the difference between winning and losing.
Exactly. And that's where McLaren's structure seems to give them an edge. They've built this environment where everyone feels like they can contribute, challenge the status quo, which leads to constant improvement.
So it's not about having one genius at the top. It's about building a system where everyone feels valued.
Yeah.
And their input matters.
Absolutely. They even brought up a specific example, McLaren's driver Lando Norris. He's known for being super involved in simulator work, always giving detailed feedback to the engineers.
That's cool.
This level of engagement from the drivers is crucial for a team to really understand their car's strengths and weaknesses.
So it's a team effort.
Right.
Everyone from the drivers to the engineers to the mechanics, all playing a vital role.
Exactly. And it brings us back to that idea of momentum. We talked about how success breeds success, but it's important to remember momentum isn't just about winning races.
Right.
It's about creating a culture of learning, constant improvement, where every setback is a chance to grow.
It's like that Michael Jordan quote, "I've failed over and over and over again in my life, and that is why I succeed." Failure isn't the opposite of success. It's part of the process.
I love that quote. And the experts, they seem to be saying that McLaren has taken that to heart. They're not afraid to experiment, try new things, learn from their mistakes. This willingness to take risks, push boundaries, that's ultimately what allowed them to break through and win the championship.
So it's not about never making mistakes. It's about having the courage to learn from them. Use them to fuel your success.
Exactly. And this leads to another fascinating part of McLaren's success, something the experts highlighted, their ability to find and nurture young talent.
You mean their driver development program?
Exactly. They talked about how McLaren has this history of spotting promising young drivers, giving them a chance to hone their skills.
Right.
And this hasn't just helped them secure top talent for their own team, it's also helped them create a strong network of drivers throughout the sport.
It's like they're playing the long game again. Investing in the future of the sport, building relationships that could pay off down the road.
Exactly. And it all comes back to sustainability. By investing in young talent, McLaren is making sure they have a pipeline of skilled drivers ready to carry the team forward in the years to come.
So we've covered a lot of ground. Stability, leadership resources, driver development. But I feel like there's still a piece missing. That special something that separates the champs from everyone else. What is it?
That's a great question. And you know what? The experts, they all seem to agree it's the culture.
Okay, the culture. Interesting.
Yeah, it's often overlooked, but it's arguably the most important thing for long-term success.
So the culture of a team. We're talking about those beliefs, the values, how they act. But how do you actually create a winning culture? You can't just snap your fingers and suddenly everyone's on board.
Right, it's not that easy. It takes time, effort. And the experts say it all starts with leadership. Zach Brown, he's cultivated this culture at McLaren. Open communication, collaboration, mutual respect. Everyone feels valued, like their work matters, no matter what their role is.
So an environment where people can share their ideas, challenge the norm, work together toward a common goal.
Exactly. And they gave a really cool example, McLaren's engineering team. When they were developing that championship-winning car, they hit a major snag with the suspension system.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, but instead of playing the blame game, they came together,
Right.
worked their butts off to find a solution. They saw that setback as a chance to learn and grow.
That's awesome. It shows that a winning culture isn't just about celebrating the wins, it's about embracing the tough times, turning those challenges into fuel for innovation.
Exactly. And it all comes back to that idea of grit, you know? They talk about that a lot in sports psychology. Champions aren't just talented, they're resilient. They have that mental toughness to push through obstacles and come back even stronger.
It's not just about having a great leader or a bunch of skilled people.
Mm.
It's about having that shared mindset where everyone embraces hard work, perseverance, and that drive to be the best.
Precisely. And the experts seem to think that this culture of grit has been huge for McLaren. They've faced their share of ups and downs, but they always find a way to bounce back. It's like they have this unshakable belief in themselves.
Like some invisible force pushing them forward even when things get tough.
Right. It's this collective resilience that helps them weather the storms and come out stronger on the other side.
So to bring it all together, it seems like building a winning Formula One team, it's not just about the fastest car or the biggest bank account. It's about creating a culture of excellence, where stability, strong leadership, smart use of resources, and that constant drive to improve all come together.
Couldn't have said it better myself. And while we can't say for sure if teams like Aston Martin can replicate McLaren's success, we can definitely learn from what they've done. Building a championship-winning team, it's a complete package. Understanding the human side, the power of culture, creating that environment where everyone can shine.
That's a great takeaway. And I think it applies to any team, really, not just in F1, but any group of people trying to achieve something great. So thanks for joining us for this deep dive into McLaren's championship journey. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more awesome insights into the world of Formula One. And if you enjoyed this episode, share it with your friends. Let's spread the F1 love.